All right, welcome back to the Culture Coach podcast. I am so excited today. We have Linda Carlisle as our guest. Linda, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So happy to have you. We are going to have a great conversation. I can just feel it. All things culture and communication. But tell me and the audience a little bit about what you do today and how you got where you are.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my background going back into, the fullness of my career, my background is in integrated marketing communications, right? How do you build a brand? How do you build an awareness of who your company is? That includes, how you present yourself to customers, but it also includes how you present yourself to prospective employees. And so as you start to look at that employment brand, what's all in that? And it's things like the employee value proposition. It's things like how you present yourself on the intranet. What does your website look like? Is it appealing to the things you're saying? Are they appealing to candidates? And all of those things, at some point in the middle of my career, I realized that all of those things that are around employment branding involve culture, involve how we build the essence of who we are, and that's marketing too. It's just marketing something really intangible that moves people. And I get really excited about that framework. And so I've spent sort of the back half of my career in this space around communications meets culture, with a little bit of philanthropy and giving and the like built into that. And about a year ago, I decided to go out on my own and offer this service up into the marketplace, really aiming at mid-market because let's face it, big companies got a lot
Yeah.
on in this space,
Yeah.
but mid-market firms don't, smaller firms don't. And so offering these services to organizations that don't have those built into their organization, and really focused in on mergers and acquisitions because during that period of time, there's a lot of change that
Yeah.
happens stepwise that really could benefit from great communication support and culture work. So
Yeah, wonderful. I love that. And I think you're absolutely right. The merger and acquisition piece is the communication. When you bring in, especially if you're acquiring and you're bringing in another team, if you don't have the communication and the assessment of the cultures, that whole process that takes place there, yeah, it's so important in bringing two teams or three teams or however many teams together. I'd love to hear more about the employment brand. And do you say employer brand or employment brand? Because I've heard it
I
both
say
ways.
employment. I say
Okay.
employment brand, but then I say employee value proposition, and you know,
Yeah.
I, and it's very interesting because the bleed over from what is your employment brand? How is it different? Is it different from your employee value proposition? Why do people come to work for you, and why do they stay? Aren't those really synonymous? And then you also have this element of your employee culture, your internal culture,
Yes.
and I feel like those things there's a lot of overlap and
Yeah.
commonality between what those
Yeah.
represent.
And the way that I look at it is in order to integrate or operationalize your culture, you start at that attract phase
Mhm.
before people even hit apply for a job, that when they see you as an employer,
Mhm.
kind of what you're communicating out, and the way that from my view, the way that I work with clients, it's really about the core values and the behaviors, that how are you portraying those to the outside world? Does that align with kind of how you think about it?
Absolutely. So I think of, I feel like when it comes to culture, there's the stuff you put in writing, the values, and whether or not they're lived or not really comes out through behaviors. So, there's values, there's behaviors, there's competencies. Competencies are the things that we can measure, but in all respects, what you're really talking about is how do we act, right? And
Yeah.
for me, there's usually three broad buckets. Where like one is how do we treat each other, right? One is how do we get our work done? And the day-to-day behaviors and how we tackle all that.
Yeah.
Then the other piece is how do we view the future and how do we set people up to help us achieve the future? And that has everything from whether or not we embrace mistakes, right?
Mhm.
Allow risk taking. Are we open to people taking a gamble and missing, as long as they've kind of made it a safe gamble, a little informed.
Yeah.
Um, and all of those things, innovation can't happen if you're not allowing for that, that safe gamble.
Right.
So, anyways, I view all those things as the behaviors that align to the values that align to, you measure through the competencies. So,
Yes, I love that. And so when you are working with a company that doesn't have, I mean, I'm assuming you're working with companies that don't have that comms team in place, that internal communication
that's
team.
correct.
They
Yeah.
bring you in, they're maybe going through a merger acquisition, maybe going through a culture transformation. Um, what are things, and for the audience that may not, maybe they can't afford to bring somebody in,
Yeah.
is there anything that you could share um, in a culture transformation or in a merger acquisition, whichever you prefer,
Mhm.
things that they could do from a communication perspective to make that successful?
So, at the very heart of how I tackle the whole issue of like working with a culture is I want to know, it's all about listening. At the end of the day, it's about listening, right? So I might come in and start listening to the leader and say, what is it about your culture that you feel like needs to change? And what's working well about your culture? And what isn't working about your culture? And
Hmm.
are there any things about your culture that keep you up at night when you think, if we don't get better at doing this, we're never going to get there, right?
Yeah.
So you have that kind of a dialogue with the leader and you document it well, and then you talk to the leadership team. And maybe you're like informed already by that input and you're kind of,
Yeah.
but at the same time, you're trying to stay open enough to sort of go, what are they saying? How do they round that up? And then you have some focus groups with the people because the people can tell you what it really feels like to be there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you look at anything that the organization has or has not done in the past. So some great things that you can look at is there anything out on Glassdoor, right?
Right.
People saying when they leave? Are you doing exit surveys? Are you doing exit interviews? What are people saying in those situations, right?
Mhm.
So that you've got some information, and then you could even interview your new hires within the first, say, 60, 90 days and say, when you came in, what did you expect based on what you'd heard about us, based on what you read about us on our website? And then what have been your impressions, right? Because all of these things, whether you call it a brand or a culture, what have you, it really is a promise, right?
Mm.
I'm looking at it as a communication standpoint, and I'm saying, here's what I'm putting out on the website. I'm making you a promise that this is what it's like to come and work at this company. Are we living up to that promise? I mean, when I realized that a brand is a promise, I think that's really was the point at which I said to myself, it's immaterial about whether you're talking about external or internal brand. You're really making a promise to a group of stakeholders about who you are and how you're going to treat them and how are you living up to that.
Yes. I love that. That's so well said. And you're right. It's a promise. And what I like about, helping leaders and organizations put that stuff up front is that then it gives the employee or the future employee or potential employee the opportunity to say, this company doesn't align with my values or my purpose, or and so I'll pass, or it's such great pay, I'm going to do it anyway. But at least they've made that decision and they know what they're coming into.
Right.
So I think that's so important for organizations to communicate that, whether it's through you know th- through marketing and the brand, or through how through how recruiters are speaking to those incoming candidates as well.
Exactly. I mean, you're probably going to put some language on the job description itself, right? But
Right.
definitely those talking points for the recruiters are critical, right?
Yeah.
Because every touch point is making that promise.
Yes.
They align. Are you doing a good job of making what the recruiter is saying? Well, they're probably saying it from the heart if they're internal, right?
Yeah.
And what are they saying, and how well does it align with what you're saying externally, and how well does it align with what that lived experience is?
Yes. Yes. So, let's talk a little bit about the mergers and acquisitions. You don't see a lot of firms focused on kind of the aspect of integration, but why do you think that's a missed opportunity for organizations?
So I feel like a lot of companies come at mergers and acquisitions with this. I mean, if I've heard this phrase once, I've heard a million times this. Our cultures are very similar. And
Mm,
that is the yes, let's move ahead, right? But how things get done are probably not that similar. I mean, maybe they will be, maybe they won't, but you really need to suss that out. Um,
yeah.
are your teams inherently collaborative, or do they hoard information, or do they willingly share information, or um, how do they go about assessing what the next steps might be in developing a product concept, for example, or
Yeah.
the risks they might take, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Um, you really got to get to the heart of that, because once you're integrated and you've put these people into common teams, the leftovers of the old culture can make things scratchy within
Mm,
those teams, and that scratchiness really is going to be felt by the employee and is unpleasant, but it also is going to really slow things down, right? It's
mhm.
friction slows down your efficacy. So it's a huge opportunity for organizations to, at that moment where you're coming together for integration, company A that is being acquired has great things about its culture. And you may be leaving those things on the table if you're just going to assume that you're going to make those folks, integrate into the existing culture. But even
Yeah.
if you're going to do that, what is the communications program you're putting in place to
Mm,
help them understand what that culture they're coming into is? Are you onboarding them in a way that helps them understand culture and how to succeed and how to fit in and all that stuff? They have great things. They also probably have some things that aren't so great. And so is the acquiring company. There's
right.
great things and not so great. And there's this moment during integration where you can say, look, let's get at those what's great. Those, here's some stuff we really wish would go away. And these are some new behaviors like risk taking, or I keep using that one because it's a great example. I think
Yeah.
we don't think enough about how important it is for people to feel safe
Yes.
trying something new if we expect to be innovative as companies. So there's this moment to say, keep, lose, add, and let's do that mindfully. Let's build a campaign around it, and let's vet it with the employees to see if they're excited about it. Right? I think there's another element of employee excitement during a merger and acquisition that is overlooked. It's an overlooked
Mhm.
opportunity because I mean, let's face it, it's stressful to go through a merger, and leadership is, their heads are about to explode with how much stress there is. So many operational things that have to get lined up and done. Even from an HR standpoint, think about the
Mhm.
systems and records and benefits and everything that has to get done. And so everyone's so wrapped up in making sure that the cogs all work and keep the wheels on the bus, that this moment of getting people really truly excited, which if you think about it is not that different from the first day of starting a new job.
Right.
And are we doing what we should be doing to really engender that? You only get that one time to really try and get that engagement. And I mean, don't even get me started on the topic of engagement because it's a mess right now.
Yeah.
So so we really have to work hard to get that. And I think we need it in our firm.
Yeah. Yeah. And is there, so one of the opportunities I had when I worked at a tech company and we were going through an acquisition and they flew me, we were acquiring a company in Hong Kong and a company in India, and I was able to go out, but we were really assessing everything that was on my questionnaire sheet. The comparison that I was doing was really more related to those processes, systems, procedures. What were they going to get to keep? What were they going to take of ours? And it there wasn't anything on my spreadsheet or in my questionnaire related to culture, but what I walked away with was definitely understanding more of their culture because I visited and saw firsthand. Is there anything that you recommend organizations do in that transition time to really get to the heart of the culture? I mean, is it questionnaires? Is it how do you get people to tell you what's working?
Yeah, that's great. I'm actually very, very much a fan of focus groups from a
Mm,
listening standpoint. I think we are a world that is really missing out on the trust gene right now. Trust is
mhm.
at an all-time high. I race out to get a copy of the Edelman Trust Barometer every year when it comes out, and like things are not looking good in that space. And so, with that said, I think when your firm's just been acquired and you don't know what to think of these people, you're really loath to sort of
Yes.
click a box and open up on paper, but in a more dialogue kind of a space, especially if it's someone from the outside or from another country that come in and they're just, they're asking open-ended questions and trying to have a great dialogue. People are willing to tell you a little bit more about what they think. And you mentioned the other countries, and that got me thinking about be it different countries, be it different locations. There is one thing that I think is worth noting about culture, and that is culture is layered like an onion, right?
Mm,
So you might have a team culture, a department culture, a location culture, a national footprint culture, uh, uh, and then your enterprise culture kind of a thing. And so you're going to allow for the uniqueness of the cultures that are in place within the different countries,
mhm.
but you're going to also say it needs to fit within the culture of our organization. So for instance, if honesty and integrity and quality are central to our sense of who we are as an organization, those have to overlay onto those cultures in China or India,
Right.
case may be. And they probably do, right? But it's just this notion that you're not going to eradicate cultures that have
Right.
within locations, but but you might eradicate individual behaviors in different locations that don't align well.
Yes. I
So
like that distinction of the behaviors,
yeah.
because I've also heard people say and not to jump back to the hiring process, but, we shouldn't be hiring for culture fit because then it excludes people. But how I like to correct people is, or, kind of refocus is really when you're hiring for culture fit or integrating for culture fit, it's
Mhm.
more about the behaviors and what are the acceptable behaviors, not, you know, your nationality or any of those
Yeah.
discriminatory things. It's more about how we behave and how we get things done here.
A big fan of behavioral interviewing when
Mhm.
you talk about bringing in an individual. So I guess that when I talk about focus groups, maybe you could view that as almost like a
Mm,
group behavioral interview in some respects, but it's a two-way interview, right? Because you're
yeah,
kind of going, what do you love about your culture? So that that if you're trying to undo something that they love about their culture, you're going to do harm to what you
right.
required, right?
Yes.
So just really thinking about it that way, I think helps be open to what you might learn.
Yeah, I love that. Well, let's talk about one of the critical issues today. Engagement, I think, is at 31%. It's fallen over the last 10. We're back to where we were 10 years ago. And in the last year, it dropped 2% just in the last year. So we are at a critical point for engagement, which impacts, retention and just the war on talent. And so I'm curious, where do you think some of that's coming from? How do we fix that? Any thoughts?
Actually, I do have thoughts. I
Mhm.
feel like it's all this is happening globally, so I don't mean to be very US centric, but I will say that in the US, we definitely have this sort of amped up disgruntlement that's going on
Yes.
out there, right? And in
Yes.
fact, I mentioned the Edelman Trust Barometers a while back. That in that study this year, they saw this emergence of disgruntlement at a measurable level, like a 40% of the workforce that was measured
Wow.
had this disgruntlement going on, and amongst the Gen Z, it was at 50%. So
Wow.
one out of every two of the people that you are talking to in that age group have something that they feel pretty angry about, or things they feel pretty angry about,
Mhm.
generalized, and they're willing to act on those things
Yeah.
online, or even up to the shooting that you saw in New York a few
Mm.
months back. So that's what's going on out there.
Right.
Not
Yeah.
anything to do with your company. It has to do with the labor pool. It has to do with our society. There's like a hotbed out there.
Yes.
And you, number one, got to deal with that within, you got to accept that it's there, know that it's there within your employee base. And then that's baseline. How are you going to get these people engaged in your company mission and get people, helping you succeed? And do they even care about succeeding? It used to be you could say, hey, if
Right.
you succeed, rising boat, or rising tide floats all boats. Uh,
Yeah.
is that something they want? And so again, it comes back to that listening, but it also comes back to like really trying to find things that people do care about. And I've really come to put a lot of value on this notion of purpose, right?
Mm.
That every company, number one, it has a business purpose. So at the baseline level, what is it as a business you are trying to accomplish? What problem does it solve? So that you have this sense of what we solve, what we make better within the world. And then
Yes.
around that, there's invariably some very natural social elements that maybe touch tangentially around that, that might be the starting point of a more societal, communal, this is our purpose, right?
Yes.
And then, when you go from there, how can you get your people involved in thinking about that greater purpose? Number one, so they get a chance to kind of show they care about something, see how the company cares about something, but also getting people out and doing something together. Like there's a pride that comes from doing something.
Yeah.
There's a camaraderie that builds when you're just doing something like raking the leaves in a senior's yard.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, as simple as that, but you're out there with your coworkers on a sunny fall afternoon and you're raking leaves, and you go back and you never look at that coworker the same again because you
Mhm.
spent that time in the sun together. And so little by little over time, that engagement with each other, that engagement with the company, that feeling that the company is doing right in the world, the feeling that you helped with helping that company do right in the world, that starts to have an effect on,
Mhm.
number one, your commitment to the company, and you're feeling good about the company and you're feeling good about yourself. But I feel like also as a society, we benefit from the blending of these good things happening,
Yes.
and that is the route back from this malaise we're in. And I
Yes.
mean that at a very deep level, right?
Yeah.
That
Yes.
that is the pathway. Those are the building blocks that get us there, because this like continue to shoot into the void at each other is just continuing to tear things down. And to me, like doing things that help build our community together, that's the way back.
I 100% agree. I love that you said that. And I think at a very simple kind of a simplistic look at it, I talk about a company's mission, vision, and values as their culture compass, right? It's the foundation. It's how they decide and communicate where they're going and what's important to them. And that mission is the why. And even organizations, I worked for a large fast food chain that is over 50,000 employees in the southern US. I worked there for 4 years, and I really struggled with their mission at first because I had health issues, and fast food was just not something that I really had a problem with the fact that we were serving this greasy food to people, So
Uh,
there was a values mismatch for me with that organization, but the way that I righted it set it right in my mind or refocused was that I was helping 50,000 employees that were maybe uneducated, that we were providing employment for these 50,000 Americans. And so I think even if your overall mission as an organization isn't, um, for the greater good or isn't some phenomenal mission, you can still find ways to connect employees to the work that they're doing.
Their work, yes, and that it matters, and that
Right.
working together in getting something accomplished can
Yes.
get you there.
Yes.
But I do think that the notion of giving an organization that sense of their impact within the community, right?
Yes.
So even in the example that you talk about, so first of all, yes, maybe that kind of food in the buffet of things that we can eat
Yeah.
in the world may not be the healthiest thing, but it's food and
And it's
it's totally
inexpensive.
affordable. Yes,
Yes. Yeah.
exactly. So I look at those kinds of things. I'm like, you're talking about affordable food,
Yeah.
and in some communities, that's a thing that matters.
Yes.
So,
Right. And unfortunately, they didn't take any of those directions, with their mission. I think there was an missed opportunity there, but I I agree with you. And the other thing I want to bring up is I have just read Why Are We Here by Jennifer Moss. Have you read this yet?
oh, no, me
She
about it.
is, yeah, she is, it's called Why Are We Here? And it's creating a work culture everyone wants. She works on well-being in the workplace, but her first chapter is really about it's setting the foundation, and it's creating hope, purpose, and community. So it's
Ding.
yes,
Right
it's
up my alley. Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
exactly. So I think you're absolutely right. Creating that purpose and then allowing employees to connect back to that purpose or helping them to connect back to that purpose. Gosh, I mean, it's work is where we spend the majority of our day.
It's
And
true. It's
yeah,
true. And I just feel like it is a feeder for so many things, like how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about how we spend the bulk of our day and how we feel about the people around us. And even like, a whole war about whether we should be going back to the office or not, right? Like when you care about the people you work with, it's a little bit more appealing to go back to the office and see them, right?
yes,
Now, have continue those relationships in a way that just doesn't happen on
yeah.
Zoom. So
Love it. Love it. Well, if somebody wants to reach out and work with you, where would they find you?
sure, you would find me. I think my website's going to be in the show notes, www.com-ext.com. Find me on LinkedIn and let's connect there. Sign up for my newsletter there. I'd love that. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys and hear what you think about culture, because the thing that's going on is this area is exploding. You mentioned the book a few
Yeah.
minutes. There are great thoughts that are continuing to come out and great ideas coming out every day around how to make culture come to life and make it compelling in this sort of brave new world of hybrid work. And
Yeah.
so I'd love to hear what other people are seeing and trying and doing. So
Fantastic. I'll put all that in the show notes. Linda, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a great conversation. I really appreciate you.
thank you. Likewise.